Hi, Craig here. Here's a time-lapse of Veronika and Felines, done in Rebelle 7. Here I'm picking out my structure, sliding it into place. For some reason, Rebelle always has it towards the left side. Now I'm increasing the texture influences and the edge darkening. I like the texture that creates. Also increasing some of the paint texture. I like to select Arronte's fractal brush. Here comes the fun part. Now that I have all the visual settings just the way I like them, I go in with a mid-tone of colors, leaning towards the dark, and just hints of light, just to get the composition down. Once I'm happy with all the initial colors, I start blocking in the proportions with the guidelines from the reference photo. This expedites this process. Now I start to add more local color, midtones, and then I start doing darker shapes, still allowing the water just to smear through the structure background. Here I'm using a dry brush called Paper. Anything blue is wet, so it soaks up the water and dries it with a cool crumbled paper texture. Now I start adding in some more local colors, slowly increasing the brightness. Now I'll switch to a bristle brush, loaded the water to 22%, gradually getting more detailed. At this point I started working on the background and decided that a structure with circles would have been better off. This one's designed by Justice, link below. So I went back in with the fractal brush, heavily loaded with water, and started experimenting with more of the texture. Drying it up, and adding some more. Now I'm starting to add a little bit more brightness to the skin, but using a saturated color of orange. Now I'm coming in with more highlights, adding more detail to the face. Just trying to block in all the shapes. Now I add guidelines to get more of the proportions right and start filling in some of the detail. Now it's time to separate the subject matter from the background. I choose the selection tool and just go around the entire subject. Once that's done, I copy and paste, rename the layer. Make sure I lock the transparency. This way my brush strokes don't go outside the subject matter. Now I start to get into the fine details. Here I've chosen the flat oil brush, starting with the midtones and working my way up to the brighter colors. Just blocking in the shapes. Still playing with some of the flat watercolor brushes, leaving in some texture. One of my favorite brushes I like to use for skin texture is the sponge brush. start zooming in a bit more, adding more detail. On the reference photo, I add more guidelines to get some of the likeness down. Now I'm going to switch to Rebelle's software recorded time-lapse video. I didn't get my screen the whole time, so... What's cool about Rebelle, you can switch the canvases. If you don't like the texture initially, you can switch in the middle of your project. Here I didn't like how the handmade paper was going, so I switched to Locta Smooth. And drips for the background. And there you have it. Had this painting printed on the canvas. Here's model Veronika showing it off.